Most people are suffering more than they realize. When I talk about suffering, it's not uncommon that I'll hear responses either in comments or elsewhere to the effect that, what's he talking about? I'm not suffering. I don't suffer. And if they listen longer, if they listen to how I unpack what suffering actually is, often it leads to this place where they realize, yeah, I guess I do suffer. I just thought that was normal. I thought that was part of being a human. I never even considered the possibility that I could live without that. So, this sense of suffering that I point to is so interwoven with what it feels like to be a person that we think it's normal. We just assume it's how this is. This is how I'm going to live my life. It's not comfortable, but I just have these mechanisms, these coping mechanisms, so that I don't have to notice how uncomfortable it is. I can tell myself that I actually feel better than I do, or I can make myself promises that in the future I'm going to get something that's going to make me feel better. I'm going to get the love that I deserve. I'm going to get the validation I deserve or want or need. I'm going to find safety, security. So we start to live in this dream world. We start to live in the world of later when, in the future then. But we forget that what underlies that movement of mind in the first place is that we don't fundamentally feel okay right now. So if you can follow those breadcrumbs back from the seeking mind, from the future oriented, endlessly promising, never delivering seeking mind, to the source of where that seeking started or starts, and realize, why are we seeking things to make us feel better? Because we fundamentally don't feel okay. And the first time we realize this, it can be pretty uncomfortable. Like seeing a part of ourselves that we don't want to see, or that we've been hiding from, or been hiding from ourselves. And it's interesting because there's a broader context to this. There's a social conditioning that holds this in place. So there's a subliminal communication that goes around among humans that keeps this complicity in place, that we all sort of keep each other hypnotized with the belief about seeking and future promises and the separation from our own suffering, the separation from our own emotions, emotion body, our quote unquote inner self, allows us to start to identify with that projection, the outer self, or the identity that we project to others, or the persona. And so we start to identify with that, and then we start to believe, well, if I can just make the persona better by posting things about myself that highlight my positive aspects, or skew things toward the positive, or how good I'm doing, or how smart I am, or how good of a family person I am, or how much I have, or how cool I am, or whatever it is, we've identified with that projection. So we start to actually believe that if I can just convince other people that I'm happy, put together, not suffering, then somehow that will make me feel better. But if we look closely, we realize it actually just distances yourself from yourself even more. So this is inauthenticity. And it can feel shameful when you start to look at it in yourself. But the truth of it is, it's just a shared collective hypnotic trend among humans that we have collectively agreed that if we just talk about the parts of us that feel good, and that we won't question when others do it, and we expect that they won't question it when we do it, then we can all kind of ignore the fact that we're all suffering a lot. Now, humans are empathic by nature, or the vast majority of them. So to some degree, we know we're not being honest about this. We can feel the pain. We can feel the pain from ourselves and the pain from others. So this creates a sort of discord between our persona and our emotion body. And some people, for whatever reason, just cannot ignore that discord. It feels really uncomfortable, really heavy. It feels like suffering. This is the type of suffering I'm talking about. And when you have that kind of suffering becoming more and more prominent in your life, to the point where it starts to feel pointless to continue to play the game of putting forth a persona that's ultimately not real, and in doing so, continue to avoid the emotional blocks or the pain or even the existential pain or fear underneath all of it, then the only place you can look anymore is directly at the suffering, looking at the truth of suffering. So while suffering is miserable, it's also a pointer to truth. It is the fuel that begins to wake us up. So then we get into the realm of awakening. Now, we may have some spiritual knowledge. We may even be a practitioner of Buddhism or something like that, and still have never fully come in contact with this possibility in a direct way where we recognize, oh, this is all about waking up from the suffering. It's about penetrating the identity veil or the identity structure that causes the suffering in the first place. And that's a real possibility for me in this lifetime and actually right now. There's a way to directly investigate the nature of all of those identity structures, the sense of being a me, the sense of being someone who has to run from pain or hide my own suffering from myself or ignore the fundamental sense of separation, that I'm separate from everything around me. I don't actually have to ignore that. I can look directly at that. So what happens when you start becoming interested in awakening in the way I'm talking about is energetically or instinctually, you know you're going against the grain. You're going against the social grain. Even though there are more and more people doing this, it's still really pretty rare to turn around in this way and swim upstream energetically. It's very counterintuitive based on our conditioning. And yet there's a truth to it. There's something very powerful in this movement when you start to pick it up, when you start to engage people who have done it or continue to do it. So that's what suffering is all about. It's miserable, of course, but it's honest. And it's a pointer, and it's the fuel that pushes one to start to inquire into their true nature in earnest. Now, when I say true nature here, I don't mean a set of descriptions from ancient texts. It doesn't mean you have to join a specific belief system or religion or group or anything like that. It means directly investigating your identity in the most instinctual way possible until you penetrate these barriers of identity, these barriers of artificial persona, these barriers of agreed upon complicity, essentially the social matrix. And you're willing to forego all of that and dive deep into the center of who or what you are, even if you don't know. In fact, knowing that you don't know, you're still willing to go there. This is a very auspicious movement when you're ready to do this. And it turns out good. It turns out better than okay. And it turns out to be really good news. It goes to a place that you can't even imagine because it's not in the world of imagination. It's not in the world of division, self, other, objects, coming, going. It's more real than any of that. It's more alive than any of that. And it's not a place outside of where you are right now. It's right where you are right now, actually. And yet the mind is making a lot of noise, which seems to obscure that. So this movement we're talking about, this interest in diving into your own true nature, going beyond all false identity structures, is available to you now in this life. Doesn't that sound great? It either sounds great or it sounds like mumbo jumbo, or it sounds like the stupidest thing you ever heard. But if you're in the first category, I have good news for you. It's available to you in a reasonably short time. But you're going to have to let go. You're going to have to let go of beliefs. You're going to have to let go of identity structures and things you've been holding on to that are actually making you suffer or continuing to cause suffering, but they promise to end it later. They promise to deliver something later. When you see clearly that that is an illusion and you're willing to let go, then you're in a good place. You'll also go through some emotional challenges. It's just going to happen, but it's okay. There are ways through that. Primarily just feeling, just letting it be. But there are also certain techniques and approaches that can help with repressed emotions and so forth. A willingness to let go of beliefs is very important here as well. So if you can feel into this instinctually, even if you're not quite sure what the heck I'm talking about, then you're in a good place. Many have done this. More and more are doing this all the time. You can wake up from the dream of separation. You can wake up from the illusion of being separate from everything. You can wake up from the illusion of having to constantly try to defend yourself, your position. You can wake up from the illusion of having to try to become something to make yourself feel okay, because everything is fundamentally okay at every level. You can know deep peace in this lifetime, ongoing. That's what we're talking about.